Hello everyone and welcome back to Wolfstar Potter. Today we are going to be discussing what I think each Marauder's favorite Quidditch team was, and why. Because why not? Let's start with James. I think that his favorite team was the Ballycastle Bats. It was the team that he was raised supporting, and Fleamon and Euphemia were very into Quidditch. They would spend hours with him outside just playing and practicing, and that's really how he fell in love with the sport. And they were huge Bats fans, so they would always pretend to be James's favorite players. He'd be like, oh, you be this person, you be that person, and he was really into it. When he became the team captain for Gryffindor and was noticeably amazing and a standout player, everyone at school would see him training himself and the team so hard, waking up every morning early, practicing late every night, right up until curfew. Sometimes a little past, but he'd always get away with it because, the prefects want their team to do well. It's, the house pride thing. They all felt that he wanted to go pro, but in reality, he was planning to join the war effort like his parents, and he did. His love for Quidditch was something that he had subconsciously intertwined with his love for his family, because that's what they would do together. So whenever he felt homesick at school, he would just train and make himself feel better. And that in turn also ended up making him a great Quidditch player, because more practice means a lot more experience. So anyway, he took great pride in having this discipline and being the leader on the team. And yeah, I'm getting a bit off track, but the main point is that the Potters loved the Bats. That was James' team. Not much is really said about Pro Quidditch in canon, but I think the Ballycastle Bats and Puddlemere United were rivals. Anyway, you'll never guess what family supported Puddlemere United, the oldest team in the British and Irish League, founded in 1163. Why, the Blacks, of course. They are, after all, the noble and most ancient house. So, when Sirius and James got to school first year, probably around the second day would be when they started unpacking, they both each hung up their, respective Quidditch posters, and they were genuinely offended at the other for putting their poster up. And Sirius probably said something along the lines like, I can't sleep somewhere with Ballycastle fans. I hate Gryffindor, and all that jazz. And that also had, not only something to do with the two being rivals and him being raised to hate Ballycastle because, his family is Puddlemere fans, but the fact that Ballycastle is also the same colors as Gryffindor. I mean, red, crimson, pretty similar, And he had probably just gotten a letter from his mother and father, ridiculing him for being sorted into Gryffindor. So after hearing that, James probably said something along the lines of I get that you don't want to be in Gryffindor, but you are. And I get that's difficult, but never insult the Bats. And as they became friends, literally within days, they would continuously tease each other about Quidditch and stick to their teams. And, that was just jokey banter that anytime it was time for the league to play, whatever season it is, that would be something. Their little rivalry would be friendly at that point, because they were best friends. However, I think that the night Sirius ran away and was tortured by his own parents in their efforts to, get him to join the Death Eaters. Yes, I know that only the running away part is technically canon, but I think that the other part is very likely, and it's a great headcanon, and for the purpose of this, it is correct. Sources, I said so. So, he went to the Potters and realized that the Potters and the Marauders were his real family, because they would never do that to him, and they loved him. He also realized that despite what his mother had always said to him about his duty to the family and all of that garbage, his blood entitled her to nothing of him. They weren't family. She didn't care for him. She tortured him. And, she didn't care for him, and that was, a really hard truth to face, that your mother doesn't love you. Genuinely does not. So, when he got back to Hogwarts, he burned every last Puddlemere United merchandise he owned, and replaced it with Bats merch that he had gone out and bought with Euthymia. He associated Puddlemere United with his family because that was their team, and excessively so. They had VIP seats and all of that and were very involved. They had a share in it. They were, that rich family. So James never really said anything about Sirius's team switch directly, but he was really, really happy about it. Not because of Sirius supporting his team. Obviously, he was a huge Bats fan, and the fact that Sirius was supporting the Bats, yay, another supporter, it didn't actually matter to him, that part of it. But that really signified to him, the team switch really signified that Sirius was his brother now, and he wasn't going to return to that awful home where he was abused. So, I think it was a lot deeper than Quidditch. On a much lighter note, I think Pete's family rooted for the Falmouth Falcons, and he did too. They're purebloods, you root for your family's team. Peter wasn't so into rooting for one team. However, he was still very, very into Quidditch. Not playing, but watching and the statistics and all of that. He and James started a gambling thing when it was Quidditch season, and Pete almost always won because he was very well researched, took it very seriously, and made well-calculated bets. He was really into it, and that was his thing. But you can't always predict the outcome of a sports game, no matter how much you look into the numbers. So, when he was wrong, he would always be so shocked and flustered and would shut himself in his bed and try to recount the numbers and find his error. If there was fantasy Quidditch, he would absolutely die. He would love it. That's the kind of Quidditch fan I think he was. He wasn't, a diehard Falcons fan. He was a diehard Quidditch fan. And finally, Remus. We all know Mooney couldn't give a toss. However, I am a firm believer that had he survived, he would have become a huge Harpies fan when Ginny made the team. Because he was just a super dedicated teacher. I remember when I was younger and I was first reading the books, I was this is the teacher they've finally been waiting for. He's awesome. He's not, stuttering Professor Quirrell, who turned out to be, Voldemort's crony. And then he wasn't Lockhart, who was deceitful and conceited. He genuinely cared about the students, and he was described as, having these shabby robes, so it was very obvious that he wasn't, conceited, he wasn't evil, he cared. And then the fact that Snape exposed him for being a werewolf and he was forced to quit, that was just, I remember being really upset about that because he was such a good teacher. He was what they really needed. But of course they had to get him out of there for plot reasons, to get Moody in there because Moody wasn't actually Moody, he was Barty Crouch, etc., etc. You all know the story. Anyway, he was an excellent teacher, dedicated to his students, and if one of his students became, a professional Quidditch player, he's gonna root for her. So, yeah. And if James survived, he would also absolutely adore Ginny and would be so happy that Harry married a Quidditch player. He would obviously root for the Harpies too, That's his daughter-in-law. He would, get tickets to all the games. Well, Harry would get the tickets and bring him, and he'd be like, this is so cool. And then Ginny would offer him to walk on the field, and he'd be absolutely nerding out about it. He's like, I want the real Quidditch field, this is the pros, that's so crazy, and all of that. And, but if the Harpies played Ballycastle, he would still root for Ballycastle, of course. He is, again, a diehard Bats fan. I hope you all enjoyed the video. Let me know what you think their favorite Quidditch teams were, or what your own favorite Quidditch team is. Thank you, and have a wonderful, wonderful day.